Hello and welcome everybody. Unfortunately, my right shoulder is still stuffed from crashing this fucking thing. So I decided to make a video I've been wanting to make for quite a long time, and that is comparing the Thrustmaster T300RS GT to the Logitech G29. Now I want to try and keep this video relatively short if I can. There's nothing worse than clicking on a video like this that goes for 30 minutes and you're just like, for the love of God, tell me which one I should buy. And I'm not really going to be aiming it as buyer's advice because I don't want that responsibility, but I'm going to give you my honest opinion, and I have lived with both wheels for a while. So to give you a little bit of background in case you are new to my channel, and if you are, please hit subscribe. I've done a lot of racing with the Logitech G29. I bought that brand new when it first released. Pretty much as soon as it hit shelves in Australia, I went out and got one. And I've done probably thousands of hours worth of running time on that across multiple different games on the PlayStation 4, the PC, games like Gran Turismo Sport, iRacing, Assetto Corsa, Dirt Rally, all kinds of things. And very well experienced. I got to a point where unfortunately a component in that wheel did break. Now the wheel does still work, it's a little bit clunky and feels like it could break at any given second. I don't hold that against Logitech, and I'm not going to go through the failure all that much, or possibly at all, because it doesn't really have an effect. I really feel like I got my money out of that wheel. Now the Thrustmaster, I haven't just got that, so there's no point in, I see a lot of reviews where people have had one wheel for a long time, they get a brand new wheel, and 2 weeks later they do a comparison between the two. I've had the Thrustmaster now for over 12 months for sure, and I've done hundreds of hours of racing, I should suspect, heaps of different races, again across a multitude of different games, so I'm pretty well experienced. I've lived with the T300 for quite a while now, so hopefully that gives me a little bit of credibility with what I'm saying, but again, just bear in mind, it is just my opinion, your mileage may vary. Right, let's start off with the pedals. Now this is a rather easy one for me to do because in my opinion, there is just not much in between it. I read a lot of things online that said the Thrustmaster were much nicer pedals, and the reason I bought the RS GT as opposed to just a normal T300 is because the normal one came with a 2-pedal setup, and of course the T300RS GT comes with 3. I already had the 3 on the Logitech, and I didn't want to lose that clutch pedal because I do actually use it a little bit, and apparently these pedals were just heaps better, but to be honest, I really don't have much of a preference either way. I had the Logitech G27 before the G29, and probably my biggest issue with that pedal set was the fact that the brake pedal was just an actuated lever like the throttle or the clutch, and you could push it all the way to the stops. In the G29 they added, I believe, a rubber block inside the brake pedal mechanism itself, or inside the spring, and essentially it adds resistance, so you can't actually push it all the way down as far as it'll go unless you're Quadzilla or someone. The Thrustmaster has a very similar setup. In fact, the Thrustmaster asks you to bolt the rubber bung on yourself. So I'll take you for a bit of a walk over there and show you what I mean. Okay, so as we have a bit of a look at the pedals, you'll see the throttle pedal here goes all the way down and hits the stops. The brake pedal actually does the same, but they do give you this thing here, which you have to bolt in yourself when you put the pedals in. It has a simple rubber cone there, and as you actuate the brake, it pushes against that rubber cone and gives you resistance. And again, it's going to be very hard to compress that rubber cone beyond a certain point. That's basically what happens in the Logitechs. The main difference being is that the rubber that they use is actually hidden in this tube. There's a spring inside that tube, and I think it's a rubber block that sits inside that. And again, when you push that down, it's a little hard, it's not bolted in. You can't push that all the way to the stops like you can the clutch, for example. But to be completely honest with you, neither of them are really any better than the other. 6 of one, half dozen of the other, they're equal. I don't care either way. So the next things to discuss, of course, are the wheelbases. And I don't know how well you're going to be able to see on camera, but this Thrustmaster wheelbase is quite a bit bigger than the little Logitechs there. Now there's quite a bit different with how these things work and give you your force feedback. The Logitech has a gear system in it. So 2 opposing gears, I think, work against each other to give you the feedback. The Thrustmaster is a belt drive. Now you really can feel that when you're actually using both of them. The belt drive in the Thrustmaster is just so much smoother than the Logitech is. The Logitech kicks harder and faster. There is less delay between the actual input of the force feedback, I suppose, from the game to when you feel it in the wheel. It's faster, it does clunk pretty hard. Thrustmaster is much smoother, but it actually does have more force, and it's just generally nicer to use. If the pedals are equal and similar, then the bases, I think this is really where the two wheels are separated. The other thing that this wheel does have, and I'm not sure if this comes under this section or the wheel section, but you can actually adjust the degrees of rotation by simply holding down the mode button and using the directional pad left or right, and it will decrease or increase the amount of rotation your wheel has. Logitech doesn't have anything like that, and if you're on a PlayStation, essentially you have no control over it. But yeah, I really think, in my opinion, the Logitech does just feel a bit clunkier, a bit cheaper. It is louder. It has a huge dead spot where the wheel sits in the middle, because the two opposing wheels or two opposing gears operate within there. You actually end up with quite a big dead spot sitting there. You don't have that on the belt drive at all. So for me, and I'm not going to go, there's no technical detail obviously in what I'm saying, but just trust me, this feels so much nicer. It's smoother. It has different fan settings you can turn on. The Logitech does not. It's just better made, and it feels nicer to use basically. So I have to give the Thrustmaster the base. So the final part of the video is going to be looking at these two wheels. Now in the background there, I do understand there's going to be some of you cable management nerd or enthusiasts that just absolutely think this is horrendous, and it is. But luckily you didn't click on this video for cable management tips, and also I've been mucking around with VR and I've just got shit going everywhere, so you'll have to excuse that. But back to the wheels. Coming from the Logitech, which I had obviously for many years, quite a long time, the wheel itself is quite comfortable. It's a leather wheel. Obviously it's not real leather, it's fake leather or fleather or pleather or whatever the hell you want to call it. Nonetheless, it's soft, it breathes well, it feels nice, it doesn't get too sticky, and it's just generally nice to hang on to it. The Thrustmaster, on the other hand, does not, because you can see that is not leather or fake leather. That is just hardened rubber, I guess. It's rubber, and it doesn't feel particularly nice to grab onto at all. It doesn't breathe at all. It doesn't. It's not that good. It's not that nice to hang on to. It's kind of hard. You hook your thumbs in there. It's all very tough compared to the Logitech. On the other hand, it's just nice, it's comfortable, it feels much nicer to hang on to, and it's you know, it's still quite thick. It's a little bit thin up the top there, but you don't really hang on to that unless you're just some mad drift dog rolling in the low. It's a little bit more like a real car to hang on to. The Thrustmaster, on the other hand, it's kind of a weird shape. It's not round, it's wide at the top, and then it's sort of narrow to look through, so it just doesn't feel nice to hang on to be honest. The next thing is the buttons. So the Logitech has got heaps of buttons. You've got your D-pad up there, L2, R2, all those sorts of things here. You also get a plus and minus, which is nice for something like brake bias or anti-roll bar. But for brake bias, I usually use the red wheel here. Now, I know on the PlayStation this thing's a bit dodgy and just doesn't seem to work the way it should, but on the PC I had no dramas. Every click gave me the brake bias I was after. So great for little adjustments. You've got the enter button in the middle, and of course the full pad up the top. The other thing you also get with the Logitech is a set of lights up here, and those lights, which I can't demonstrate because they're not plugged in, these lights actually are really helpful. They're proper shift lights. They function with just about every game I plug it into, and I often used to shift based off these lights, not anything that was happening on the screen. The Thrustmaster, on the other hand, does not have any of those such lights. Doesn't have the red wheel, it doesn't have the plus and minus button. You've obviously got your L2 and R2 up the top. It doesn't quite feel as nice. These buttons aren't too bad to grab onto, but it just feels like you had so much more option and movement. The D-pad on this just feels a bit cheaper and nastier, not as nice as the actual Logitech, so I have to give the win to the Logitech. The G29's just got a much nicer wheel. Right, to summarise, let's go back to the pedals. Honestly, 6 of one, half dozen of the other. They both feel pretty similar to use. I actually have no preference to one over the other. I'd be happy with either, so don't make a purchase based off that. In terms of the bass, this is the big difference, and I think This is where the Thrustmaster T300 really does have an advantage over the Logitech. That belt drive feels so much smoother, more accurate force feedback. Okay, it may be a little bit delayed, but I mean, we're talking such small amounts of time that I certainly never noticed a time difference, even though technically it is there. It's a nicer thing. It just feels nicer and smoother in your hands. I have to give a clear win to the Thrustmaster over the base itself. And finally, the wheels. I'd have to give it to the Logitech. It feels nicer in your hand. It's got that fake leather, but it's perforated. It feels softer. It's just nicer. You won't get calluses on your thumbs as quickly. And the buttons, I think, are just better laid out and more of them. So I do give that advantage to Logitech, which might make your decision, if you're trying to purchase one at the moment, or at least pick a favorite, might make your decision a little bit harder. But I guess what I would say as well, Thrustmaster brand have their own load cell pedal. If you don't know what a load cell pedal is, it's going to blow either of those two out of the water. It's going to feel much nicer, much more realistic, and you can actually buy a set of these load cell pedals to plug straight into your T300 wheel, and Rob is your father's brother. You're going to be away, they're going to feel much better. Logitech doesn't have that, so if you did want to sort of have the option to upgrade the pedals later, if you're on PC, it doesn't matter, of course, you can buy any pedals and just use the USB, but if you're on a console, for example, you'll need them to plug into the wheel and you'll need them to be recognized by the console. So Thrustmaster's got you there. The other thing that T300 does, which the G29 does not do, is it has multiple steering wheels. Okay, so it comes with the one that we looked at, but you can actually purchase a Formula 1 wheel, and there's another wheel, I can't remember off the top of my head, but you can purchase them very easily, unscrew the existing, take it off, put one of the different ones on, screw it on, and you're away. And that is factory, that is something Thrustmaster make. It is just an upgrade for the wheelbase. And that's really cool. You can't do that with a Logitech. Now, there are guides on how to add your own custom wheel to the Logitech, but you have to remember, if you go down to Super Cheap and buy a steering wheel straight off the shelf, a real car steering wheel, it's nice to have the bigger diameter and have it feel more realistic. But you're going to lose all your buttons. You can't use those buttons that the wheel comes with because they're part of the wheel, and it means you've got to build a button box. Again, not so bad if you're on PC maybe, although you're going to have none of the controls on the wheel, which is down, or you're going to have to try and 3D print something out that you can stick to it. The reality is, yes, it can be done. Most people aren't going to do it. And on a console, you're going to have to trick the console into thinking that the buttons you have, whether they be on a button box or elsewhere, are the ones that the wheel came with. So it's a lot of mucking around, and the reality is most people aren't going to do that. So that's another big tick to Thrustmaster. And to get on to the one thing I haven't mentioned this entire video, and that is price. Back when I bought the G29, or at least I was looking into comparisons between G29 and the Thrustmaster T300, I think it was that at the time, the prices were fairly similar. I think the Thrustmaster was maybe $100 more. I went the Logitech way because I had the G27 and it had always been pretty good for me. It was much more available in Australia where I was. It was harder to get Thrustmasters at the time. But now the price has come down so much for the Logitech. The G29s are closer, I would say, to the T150s from just a quick search on Amazon. And the T300 is a couple $100 more. This is where things get tricky. If you do want to purchase, you're trying to figure out which is the best wheel, it can get a bit tricky. I think if the G29 and the T150 in your local area or country is similarly priced, I think the G29 is better than the T150. As I said, I don't own one of them, but I have tried it before, and I think the G29 is your best bet there. With that in mind, if the G29 and the Thrustmaster T300 are about the same price, I would go the T300. I think the base alone, the adjustability of the wheel and the different things you can buy for it, the upgrades you can purchase for the wheel, means that if they're similarly priced, I would go the T300. If the T300 is a couple $100 more than the G29, that's where it gets a little bit more difficult, and that's a decision you're going to have to make if you want to spend the extra money, because is that worth $300, $200 more than the Logitech? Dunno, that's a really hard call. So anyway, I hope you've got something out of this video. Sorry it's a little bit agricultural in nature. I know the production quality is not the greatest, but hopefully you got something out of it. And please remember, if you enjoy watching creators create videos on YouTube, please help support them by leaving a like. It does help them out and it keeps them going, otherwise people will stop making stuff. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching. It was great to be joined by you. Hopefully I'll talk to you in a future video, but for now, it's goodbye.